This is the Run Pod Option. I'm Marty.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm Jeff.
And you can follow us on Twitter at RunPodOption. You can email us runpodoption@gmail.com. If you're listening to the show and you have a Twitter, tweet at us. Tell us your worst, your favorite bad take that we're probably going to have this week. We are recording on the 17th of August, so we haven't had a show for 3 weeks, I believe. We just finished up our conference previews. We knew that there was probably some bad news coming down the pipe, and lo and behold, here we are.
Now, I did say at the end of that, at the end of the last preview, that we will see you in fall of 2021.
Yeah, you almost called it, because honestly, I was expecting a season review podcast after you floated that idea last week as the cancellations were coming down. So just to kind of cover the cancellations that we know of right now, we have no fall football for Division III football, Division II football, FCS football, and at the FBS level, we have no Big Ten, no MAC, no Mountain West, no Pac-12, no UConn, UMass, Old Dominion, or New Mexico State. There's a kicker with the FCS. There are some teams that are still trying to play, like North Dakota State, but they are trying to find FBS opponents at this point, so we'll see how that works for them. If you believe North Dakota State, I think they just said they reached out to 100 different teams to try to play, which is weird because right now only 70 or 78 are like dedicated to playing this year. So who knows? So as of today, we have the American, the Conference USA, Sunbelt, Army, Liberty, Brigham Young have no changed schedules yet other than a few games here and there. The ACC, the Big 12, the SEC, and then oddly, Florida International and Rice have modified seasons. So, a lot has happened. Do we want to go ahead and just start this with what are the chances college football gets played across those remaining leagues?
I think that's probably a great place to start.
Okay, so before we do our prediction, I'm going to ask you guys a percentage, right? If you're going to, or even if you want to, odds if you're feeling gambling worthy. But just let's talk about the mood. Jeff, your team, or rather the conference your team is in, is not going to be playing football. So how was that to kind of, because it sucked to see from my angle, but I didn't even consider that like a Purdue fan is probably going to have their heart broken, but a Michigan fan especially.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It was really tough to see from just the, your team perspective. You're excited to see, new players, all that kind of stuff. You can't wait to see the new recruit that's a 5-star come in, and hopefully he doesn't suck. But it was also kind of weird watching the other fans, like who you usually don't like. Like I love bashing Nebraska fans, but it was kind of strange rooting for them also, and even Ohio State. I know we're going to talk about Justin Fields later, but like the dude was doing a good. It was just really strange to be like, yeah, we're all in this together. Oh, we're not.
Yeah, it's sort of that the way that SEC fans chant SEC. It feels like there was a Big Ten chant, and it was met with cries. So there's two parts kind of to the Big Ten that only kind of just popped into my head. But one was, I believe it was Harbaugh that was talking about how successful Michigan was at handling practice and handling quarantine and everything else, and mentioning, I believe it was his suggestion that the rest of the league could adopt it, or maybe the NCAA. I can't remember. Do you know what I'm talking about, though?
Yeah, he published a kind of like a brief letter on, hey, we deserve to play, and it was really more fact-based, based on Michigan's COVID testing over the last 2 months and how the trend that I think the last 300 tests, they've had no positive results. It's basically stating that methodology could be used across the conference, which I think the Big Ten was trying to implement some kind of standardized testing anyway, but that was kind of his argument.
And the follow-up to that was also that I saw today the athletic director at Penn State is now claiming that they're not even sure there was a proper vote among either school presidents or I guess, other medical officials for each individual school, which now seems to, I think it was Dennis Dodd that reported it, and everything that's being reported is inherently like I'm taking with a grain of salt because things are changing at such a breakneck speed, not just with like coronavirus in the world, but also with like in particular college football and coronavirus. It was reported 12-2, the vote, I think, when they canceled it. And now they're saying, well, actually it was 8-6. And then there's also like, well, maybe there wasn't a vote at all. Well, I don't know what I think it's people covering their ass, like the athletic director at Penn State might be trying to do. In that you don't want to be the person that voted yes to kill football. So you're like, oh yeah, listen, 8-6. We were definitely one of those 6, though. I promise.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
There were 14 teams that were one of those 6.
Yeah, it just feels weird. And do we want to kind of dive into the Justin Fields thing a little bit? Because he's started a petition to try and have the Big Ten. I also saw the parents of Big Ten athletes are trying to. I don't know if those are the same movements.
I think that he got like somewhere around like 30,000 like signees like within like the first like weekend of him doing this. It's something like that, and it was parents and people like that. Of course, they're going to be signing it. Well, actually, I'm kind of surprised. You'd think that they'd want to. I know that these kids, they want to see their kids go out there and succeed and play football, but you'd think that they'd also be a little concerned about their health and safety. I don't know. I've got a weird feeling about this whole deal, and it'll go into like what I think about them, about the whole league actually playing this year. But
the MAC and the Mountain West canceling makes sense because I think everyone's trying to figure it out still. But just seeing like the Big 12 example for testing, they're planning on testing 3 times a week. And for that much money to be spent, it's like $45,000, $50,000 a week that you're spending on testing. If you don't have an on-campus laboratory that's associated. Let me add that, because the Big 12 I think has half their teams are using labs that they're partnered with, and the other half are just doing it on campus. Like Texas Tech is just crushing it because they're doing it all on campus, like almost every other day, and they're getting 24-hour turnarounds.
These schools that have like good like medical schools.
Research, yeah.
Exactly. So like the MAC and the Mountain West, I understand that not every school will be able to afford that, so I get it. Even the UConn, UMass Old Dominion, New Mexico State, I get that too. With the Big Ten and the Pac-12, you'd think that at least the funds, it also feels like, kind of speaking opposite of what Jeff was mentioning, but this Big Ten unity or Pac-12 unity among schools, it seems pretty crazy that Ohio State wouldn't come out and just say, hey, we want college football. Which one of you schools are going to have a problem meeting this bill? Right? That can't do this testing, and let's pull our Michigan has a lot of money, I'm assuming. Michigan, Ohio State, and whoever that are floating that money to get it so that Maryland and that Rutgers and that Purdue, if they're having issues money or financially to be able to meet those demands, like it seems crazy that you can't do it together, that they have less cohesion than what the players have done over the last 3 weeks, which we'll dive into here in a little bit.
I'm sure that like Penn State has the money too. Northwestern probably has the money too, just because, and it's got the medical facility there too. So yeah, you've got options, but I was gonna say, like, how feasible is it to really run these kind of numbers every week?
Well, that leads to, I mean, not to go down the path of, politics and all that, but they're one of the, and I think Marty Dennis Dodd posted an article about this, one of the, I think it was the Yale-sponsored testing, the saliva testing one, got approved by the FDA or whoever it was, and it's the cheapest testing, $4 a test, and also you get results back in a few hours. Like, that's the, I mean, if that works, that would have been something the Big Ten probably should have waited on, because that cuts your testing costs probably more than in half, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Did they pull the trigger too? I think that's the question that's coming up. Did they pull the trigger too soon?
I think Max Olson also wrote something about that today too, because that test, that saliva test, they're still working apparently on the kinks of false negatives, because it still has a higher. So it's a super quick turnaround. So that's great. Whenever it doesn't have many false positives, which is also great, but it's got a lot more false negatives. And I guess if it's that cheap, you can just test them daily and not take the chance. It still feels like, though, and just I'm using Big 12 because I read it about it today, because I think it was that Max Olson article that I read.
Mm-hmm.
But if Oklahoma State can get results in 24 hours, that's great. There's still the question of the days in between, or the last day tested to the game. What can happen, right? That's what has us in our house now, right? Because you want to play it safe still, but when West Virginia is using a lab that they're partnered with, and they're taking 24 hours to do the results. But then I think West Virginia had a surge in cases, and those started lagging, and it took 3 or 4 days because they're dependent on the lab instead of their own resources to do those testings.
Mm-hmm.
Can we afford that in November when, let's say, cases are just staying a steady climb, but you have more people that are getting sick from the seasonal flu additionally, so you have more testing, so it's more backlog. Like that, it's almost... Because I think everybody's going to take that precaution. Like that's another. There's so the web is very intertwined. And did the Big Ten pull the trigger too early? Yes, probably. But I'd also, after seeing how these campuses, which I'm going to go ahead and dive into, if you guys don't mind.
Well, just one more point about that West Virginia deal. I mean, you can't have that lag. You just can't and hope to run a season. Because let's say that you have 2 people that have tested positive. Well, they've been practicing all week now.
Yep.
And they're going to get everybody else sick that's on the team.
And even if it's like 3 more, it's still, if you get lucky and one person gets sick and they only infect 4, if those people are not tested at the same time, it's that exponential thing that's kind of scary. And I want to give, it's not even really a shout out, but it's a good point from, I think he was the most recent guest host we had, but Mark Givler from Buckeye Scoop, who is an Ohio State recruiting guy, and he's great. This is not his words necessarily, but I think he's pro letting the players play, right? But one of the things he brought up, and he brought up as his examples, is the dirty secret is these universities have slowly tried to separate their athlete base from their student base for the last 10 or 20 years. So there's very little interaction unless it's intentional by the player on a day-to-day for an Ohio State running back, say. Their day-to-day at Ohio State is already pretty isolated and with that team. So in essence, they're their own little bubble. And if you buy that across every football team, then I think it could work, right? If you could guarantee that Oklahoma has a bubble, that Oklahoma State has a bubble, that Ohio State has a bubble, that Cal has a bubble for their whole team.
I just don't think I don't think that's realistic to think with college kids, especially if there's people on campus.
Besides the college kids, let's shift. We've all been that age, right? And we were all presumably idiots in some form or fashion. I can attest to it. I'm lucky I didn't go to university, and I was a fucking idiot. Pardon my French.
I can totally attest to it. I went to 2 schools that were major college football schools, and I've been to parties that football players were at, that basketball players were at. They go out and do the same thing.
I'm pretty sure when you took me to Virginia Tech, I stole a box of wine from a party below us, and there was definitely at least one football player there. Almost positive, because they were very big dudes, and I was very scared when I stole the wine. And it was a poor decision. I've never had a hangover that bad. But if you remove that, you're still saying, Oklahoma, use your resources to make a bubble for these players that, oh, by the way, are amateurs. Like, it's still, and have your normal students still going to school and not having the safety and precautions that you're taking with your football team. You're making the case for the athletes to get paid.
Well, that's one of the big things that this pandemic has done, is it's shown that the NCAA has been hiding behind these are amateurs, these are student athletes, when now, instead of being like, yeah, you can't be on campus, they're trying to find ways to get them on campus. Like in the Pac-12 at one point was thinking about, the kids are not going to be on campus, but the players will be there. Well, that just officially makes them not amateurs anymore, because you're forcing them to be on campus when the rest of your student body isn't.
Right, they're staff
just so you
now.
just so you can make some money, put out a product.
I'm going to read some of these headlines and clips from articles from the last 2 weeks, because schools have started having students show up. I guess this is the time of year. Again, I did not go to university, so I don't know about moving in. This is news to me.
This is definitely the time.
But after I kind of read through some of these things, we'll kind of talk about them. But then we're going to go ahead and go into the We Are United and the We Want to Play movement, okay? This is from the Daily Tar Heel. This was today. The headline reads, UNC has a clusterfuck on its hands. It was an editorial. And I'm going to read the opening sentence, and then I'm going to read the last 3 sentences that it has in the article. It's not really cherry picking. If you read it, it's this throughout. I'm just cutting out some of the fat because you don't want me reading for 5 minutes. Quote, we're only a week into the semester and 4 COVID-19 clusters have already surfaced on and around campus. Okay, and then we're going to go ... Quote, we're angry and we're scared. We're tired of the gaslighting, tired of the secrecy, tired of being treated like cash cows by a university with such blatant disregard for our lives. UNC is often recognized for the ambition demonstrated by its students and faculty, and the administration's insistence to maintain an on-campus presence amid a pandemic can definitely fall under that. One thing's for sure, this roadmap leads straight to hell. Ooh.
Pretty scathing indictment.
Big shout out to journalism, to proper school journalism. That's fantastic. And then I've got 2 more things here. I wanted to go
that's come out of UNC in years.
The only legitimate thing that's come out of there in years.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you know what? That's kind of safe for the players because they don't attend classes anyways.
You're saying that student wasn't an African studies major?
Or the old underwater basket weaving bit.
Matt Leinart.
From CBS News, 23 members of a sorority, Pi Beta Phi at Oklahoma State, have tested positive for coronavirus. Fall classes began today. They're all under quarantine, by the way. And I think only 1 were showing symptoms. From Fox 10 in Alabama, of the 30,000 students tested returning to the University of Alabama school system, 0.83 have tested positive, which they say is good. And I say that is good. That's less than 1%. That's not a bad return, right? I think they used that because it's 250 students that still tested positive. Like that's 200.
Yeah, that's still 250 kids.
Like it's and then just it's not. This is an audio medium, but the pictures that were all over social media from Georgia, Austin, Stillwater, Tennessee, like every possible Clemson, UVA, every school that is having students return to campus, there are pictures of anywhere from 50 to 300 kids, nut to butts, maybe a handful of masks, and they're either waiting in line because they're having to get tested, which this seems crazy, or they're out at a bar already and partying, or they're in line to get their dorm assignments or whatever it is. Like,
there's also a common thread with all of these schools that you're saying. They're in the South.
Yeah. I mean, this issue isn't happening for the California schools, right? Because they've already said We're just going to do remote. Yeah. As of today, by the way, I didn't have it mentioned in my notes, but that UNC editorial has now led to UNC deciding, yes, we probably should have less people on campus, but I believe they're only having underclassmen report back home to learn remotely.
Gosh.
Which tells me that they're still keeping juniors and seniors there. And
is it because they might be 21 and no longer minors?
Could be. Yeah, that's not a bad bet. But now, what you've just done, if you're UNC, and what you're going to do with these other schools as spikes continue to go and you have to go remote, is, hey, you've now taken 250 out of 30,000 students and now turned that into, let's say it's only like 1,300 positives out of 30,000. And now you're asking those 1,300, did I say 13,000? 1,300 to return back to their home, whatever town that is, return back to their parents, return back by their grandparents, wherever they're from, and now put other people or other communities at risk. Like you're by having all the students show up, you've created your own hotspot. It's created a hotspot.
And not to mention, you now have kids in there that, before they get tested, they're still mingling with other kids on the university. So now they've been in contact. You now have those same people sitting in lecture halls that are going to be used by other people later on in the day with no sanitizing. We don't know what's going on there. And to kind of bring it back to football, all of a sudden you got players that are going in there. They're getting contact. So the bubble, I just don't, for them wouldn't work. Not if you're forcing them to go to class.
You would have to almost do what the NBA's done. If you're a conference and you want football, would be, I'm trying to think of a venue that would even be big enough. Jesus, maybe
Orlando.
Let's take Dollywood. So the SEC, all of their coaches and players go to Dollywood. They're the only ones allowed on premises, and I don't know how many hotels are there, but there's got to be a lot. And they quarantine. That's the only chance this thing has. For the Big Ten, I don't know where you'd have it. And if you did have a bubble, that storm that just blew through is probably destroying it too, just like it did poor Iowa. So I'm going to go through the timeline of the We Are United and the We Want to Play movements.
AKA Marty's mental break night.
This was...
sent you through all of the emotions.
Yeah, we'll get to that. It's you know what? I'll just say it now. Like I went to bed smiling, and that whole day, I'll tell you as we go along. Honestly, it was a weird thing. Okay, so let's start with the hashtag We Are United. On August 2nd, through theplayerstribune.com, Pac-12 athletes released the hashtag We Are United mission statement. Their demands to protect and benefit both scholarship and walk-on athletes. So without a lot of the smaller bullet points, they had 4 major points that I want to hit. They had 1, health and safety protections, COVID-19 protections and mandatory safety standards. 2, protect all sports, preserve all existing sports and eliminating excessive expenditures. 3, end racial injustice in college sports and society, a civil engagement task force, a percentage of conference revenue to support financial aid to low-income students, community initiatives, and form an annual Pac-12 Black College Athletes Summit. And 4, economic freedom and equity, including guaranteed medical expense coverage, name, image, and likeness, rights and representations, fair market pay, rights and freedoms. So, the We Are United came out, and before we go to the next step, I know that Jeff is on Twitter more than you, Kyle, and I know that I'm on Twitter way too much. What is a Twitter? That's at...
I don't know what a Twitter is.
It's at... God, what is your... I don't even know what your Twitter is.
At Third Down Fullback.
Third Down Fullback. So I'm not asking you necessarily to tell us what your site is, because I think I know, but I just wanted to point out that when this happened, there were pretty polar opposite takes that seemed to be happening. Either you were in support of the players using their voice, or you felt like the players were holding the conference and football at ransom. depending on how you think, I can understand both of those takes, right? If you're not focused and you think that amateurism is the only thing that makes college football special, I think A, you're dumb, but also B, I could see you understanding that these players are going to ruin something you like watching every fall. I'm glad that the people that I follow that are journalists or writers or bloggers or podcasters about college football, all kind of in unison, were happy, whether they agreed with it or not, that the players are using their voice. Because that's what's been missing. And we've spoken about it when we had the Big 12 episode about Chuba Hubbard, right? And him doing it. And players before him, I'm blanking on his name, but the Mississippi State running back that Hill that led the changing of the Mississippi flag. Like, this is cool to see. This is how movements start, right? And the We Are United one was one of those. What happened though? What preceded was an astroturfing campaign from a lot of small-time media members on social media that started tagging athletes and urging them to use the hashtag #WeWantToPlay. One of these people are our former hosts, the Fifth Quarter Company, or whatever they are, Incorporated. They were all over this. They were tagging every single person, every single player they could. But it never felt like it's because they wanted the players to say we want to play. It's because they want the players to play. Like, it was pretty transparent what they were doing.
Very much
right?
Dance for Me. Yeah.
Yeah. It you know what? It felt like that. And it felt like here's the carrot, here's the hashtag, so you can play for us. So the fans wanted the kids' voice to be heard, just not the ones that were using the We Are United, right? Because those people, that group of people at the Pac-12, they wanted to they wanted to also end racial injustice. Like, how dare they? So
they also want to take away my Saturdays.
And the thing that was disappointing is it worked, right? The same type of people that call into Paul Feinbaum's show were all over Twitter retweeting the We Want to Play hashtag, and it started to gain steam.
Including our president.
And our president retweeted it on the 9th, I believe it was. And on the 9th, that Sunday, I didn't tweet a whole lot from the Run Pod Option podcast account, not even my personal account. I just sat and kind of looked at my phone and saw this really just like vile back and
toxic.
Forth. It was, toxic is the best way to explain it. And not to punch holes in anyone's argument, but anyone that seemed to be behind the We Want to Play, they only used the example that the kids should decide. And these kids should also decide, like, COVID, coach health, whatever else be damned, the kids should decide. And I looked over at my wife, and I was not crying, but I was very, very, very bummed. And I just said, I see this, and I like this. And I like the support I see for this. But then I see this AstroTurf movement start drowning out those other voices, and it's starting to just sound like, the dumbest dog barks the loudest, right? Or the guiltiest dog barks the loudest. And that's what it felt like. Not from the players, but from the people that were trying to signal boost those players wanting to play. Then at 12:01 on August 10th, I happened to be up. Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, and a number of other high-profile athletes all tweeted #WeWantToPlay. And they had an image similar to the way the We Are United had an image that they were posting on Twitter. They released it with that hashtag, which was going crazy at that point. And the image showed that the We Are United players and the We Want to Play players, those camps combined. And their demands, as it read, we all want to play football this season. We need to establish universal mandated health and safety procedures and protocols to protect college athletes against COVID-19 among all conferences through the NCAA. Give players an opportunity to opt out and respect their decision. Guarantee eligibility whether a player chooses to play this season or not. Use our voices to establish open communication and trust, ultimately create a college football players association, and then representative of the players of all Power 5 conferences. I think they've since amended that to include all conferences. So, good.
Definitely.
Absolute bomb. And now, everyone that was supporting We Want to Play by way of association also now support a players union. And
4D chess.
And you love to see it. It was
players playing 4D chess. Wonderful.
I saw someone explain it as one of the greatest play fakes they've ever seen.
This was the 2007 Boise State hook and ladder play.
Statue of Liberty.
Yeah. The camera was at midfield and the player was 20 yards downfield. They never saw it. Besides this being really, really cool, and I had a question of where do we see these demands leading, but I want to actually just point out one thing. They said college athletes, not student athletes. I think that's really, really important. But we had a question from Twitter, from the Juicing the Numbers podcast. We've had Corwin on the show many times. Corwin and Josh host it. They're good dudes.
Good dudes.
They ask, how much bigger or smaller of a debate would the college football season be if the players got paid? And that is essentially kind of what we see missing from the play mission. They didn't mention getting paid like the We Are United players did. And I think what they did, whether it was intentional or not, they're asking for the support of a union. And once you get the union, you then get the power to negotiate the money.
Exactly. It is getting the rest of the schools to agree to, and the NCAA to agree to have a union, because they're not asking for the money right now. They're not asking for it. But once we get the union in, then we can start pushing it when CBAs start to come up.
Yeah, it's go time. And that's sort of why, as much as I'm ready for them to get paid yesterday, one of the things that I went to bed smiling, and I was upset my wife was then sleeping because I couldn't tell her about everything that happened because I was giddy with excitement. But I sat there thinking, like, cool, this is the realest first step we've had into an NCAA players union. And it's well overdue, in my opinion. I think, Kyle, it sounds like you're on the same board. Jeff, do you want to tell us that unions are bad or anything?
I think a college players union exists. I think it just doesn't do anything right now. It's not a union; it's a players association. But I think it's basically a waste from what I saw online. So I agree. In essence, it's time. It's been time.
It might be one of the biggest positives that might come out of COVID is that this pandemic has been a catalyst for something that should have been done 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, when you have people like Chris Webber going and half of the Michigan basketball team getting in trouble for, accepting a sandwich from a booster.
Yeah. I don't know where the quote comes from, but there's sometimes weeks feel like years, and sometimes years feel like weeks. And for all the push and pull over this student athlete amateurism part, it felt like in the last 3 weeks, and COVID being the fuse that lit it, it feels like it's expedited this thing immensely from a college football standpoint and an amateur standpoint.
Well, I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier. It's taken down that wall of the NCAA being able to hide behind amateur status, because now they're asking these kids to do something that they're not asking the rest of their students to do.
If there are programs that are going to disintegrate because they're not having football this fall, that's evidence enough. But the campus thing, and to actually try to answer their questions, how bigger or smaller of a debate would it be? I think you'd probably still have the same debate. The difference is that there's actually two people in that debate, And it's not the schools deciding or the conferences deciding only. The players having a vote might make it more difficult to come to an agreement, but at least the people that would be playing, or once that agreement is made, you can say A, B, and C all agreed to it. And that's the most important part of this. Like, I still don't want to see kids playing when there's a chance, even if it's 0.05, that their lungs are, fried the rest of their life because of coronavirus. But if they're getting paid and thus semi-pro or however you classify them, and their medical expenses are paid for by the schools and not out of pocket, I think I'd be more inclined to support it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that if the players were paid, it would feel more like the NFL decisions, just because they're making their own decisions there with their own career at that point,
Yeah, I mean, there's still some billionaire bootlickers in the NFL too. Like, I don't doubt that's going to happen, here either. But having an equal voice,
you're seeing the ability for players to opt out in the NFL and accept like a certain amount, like basically a loan for the year. But if they don't make the team next year, they do have to pay it back. But it's a career, and they're at least making some sort of an attempt to allow them to have the free will to not play the season and still make money, but also make the decision that they want to play for their full salary.
Do we have anything else on the last 3 weeks that you guys want to hit on before we maybe just oddly shift into conference schedule talk?
Well, we still haven't answered the question of how confident we are that the season's actually going to be played with these.
Oh God, yeah, we have gone down that tunnel and passed it a few times. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So Kyle, give me a percentage chance that any college football gets played this fall. I'm not gonna count like Army and Navy playing and that's it. I mean like any. God, let me just say that. Yeah, any football.
I think there's going to be like a 90% chance that we play like week 1, week 2. I'm going to say it's a 15% chance we finish the entire season out. I think that the Southern conferences are going to be very, hard-nosed and bullheaded about it and try to get it done. But I think it's going to come at the expense of teams, players getting COVID and having to cancel games because they're and then it's going to turn into an absolute shit show, and they're not, and then COVID's going to flare back up in October, and we're going to be out of a season at that point.
All right, Jeff, same question.
Chances we play any football, I would say about 10. I'm going to say 10%. And that's even getting to the first week. Looking at the schedules, I think they're just going to start in a month. I just think you're going to see some worse outbreaks at some of these schools, and it's going to cause a team to cancel.
Syracuse might cancel because their players are already, feeling pretty wary about it.
Yeah,
because Hugh Freeze is an idiot.
It's
God.
There's a lot of intentional. When I look at something like the ACC schedule, that they're starting September 12th, and the Big 12 and the SEC are both starting September 26th. So that makes me think that there's probably a higher % chance than I normally would put on there being football, because they're taking their time to presumably isolate their teams.
Well, aren't we going to get a TCU SMU?
God, I don't know.
On September 5th?
I hope so.
That's football.
I can't. Dallas is not doing well right now, so they just
had a soccer game with people in the stands.
Yeah, but not many people attend those Not many people attend those games with no coronavirus. I'll tell you that right now.
I'm just saying that if they're willing to do that, I don't think that there's really much of a chance that they're not willing to put two football teams out there and let them play on national TV.
God, it makes my skin crawl, man, and I hate that it does. I don't know. they've done, I don't know if they have done dumber things. I was just going to point out that the ACC, it is interesting how everyone has at least one open date in the third or fourth week. So if they do decide that some outbreaks start happening, I could see a lot of those games shifting to 9/26 and 10/3. I think that was very intentional, kind of speaking to what Jeff brought up. I'm going to say
finish the season quicker.
I'm going to say there's a 50% chance that we have a week where multiple games are played. I think it's probably a 3% chance that we finish the season, or that someone plays more than 4 or 5 games.
Wow, I guess I'm the eternal optimist over here. Actually, I don't know if it's optimism or just bullheadedness from the NCAA in these conferences.
I'm trying to take a level-headed take. Do I think that, like, Vanderbilt... Well, I think Vanderbilt might be on there. I think Vanderbilt might take a level-headed approach. Do I think South Carolina will? I don't know. Will they be, they're so set on playing Kentucky at the end of the year that they're going to bull their way through the rest of the season?
Clemson will bull their way through. Alabama will bowl their way through. Texas will bowl their way through. Yeah. Oklahoma State will too, just because Gundy.
Let's get to the ACC. We'll start there since you kind of started naming some teams. So this may have already changed, honestly, this ACC schedule. Like it's things are changing a mile a minute. Another percentage question for you, Kyle. Percentage chance that Liberty plays Syracuse in October, despite not testing players for 2 weeks.
0. 0 chance. I think that they're going to say, hell nah. I think that the conference will say, hell nah. You're not playing Liberty. Liberty, you're not playing... Because Liberty's playing like three ACC schools.
Virginia Tech and North Carolina State.
Yeah. ACC will put a nix on that. They will say, no. You either start testing daily or 3 times a week, or you're not playing us, anybody in our conference.
So, one game that stood out immediately, just because I like the rivalry, Virginia Tech and Virginia are playing September 19th.
Yeah, we're getting that out of the way really early.
That is the weirdest. It is just so weird, man. It's just the world we live in. Louisville playing Miami on that same weekend. Notre Dame and Duke. It's dumb. I don't even want to look at Notre Dame's schedule. Notre Dame.
Well, there's another weird part that we need to talk about. Is Notre Dame, if they do this season, Notre Dame has a chance to win the ACC in a one-and-done season. It'd be a real weird stain on the ACC.
Our ultimate nightmare is coming true.
I fucking hate it.
Do you think there's a chance that schools start dropping out if that looks like it's going to happen? Like, if there's like Notre Dame is they're like 8-0. They only have Boston College left, and North Carolina and Syracuse. North Carolina's already canceled it because their whole campus is eaten up with it. And Syracuse is like, yeah, we're gone. We're stepping aside.
Syracuse is their last game of the season.
Yeah, and it's the one win they need to win the conference. And Syracuse is like, look at us, man.
Sorry, guys.
There was a leak in the new dome, and looks like coronavirus got in.
One thing that is very interesting about this is we might get one of our out-of-conference games that we really wanted to see.
Virginia and VMI.
Miami UAB.
Ooh.
That's interesting, yeah, because that's still scheduled for the 10th of September.
When UAB beats Miami?
Yeah, especially now that, we're going to talk about it, but Greg Rousseau's gone.
Yeah. If Miami loses first week, do they cancel the season?
Do you think that De'Aaron King cancels the season?
He tries to
transfer again.
Transfers to UAB.
He just takes their bus back. De'Aaron King at UAB would be a lot of fun. I don't think anything changes. Just looking at the schedule, I think Clemson's far and away my pick.
Yeah, I think that this does way more hurt to Syracuse than it does anything.
You think so? If I'm just going to list their games, I'm going to leave off Liberty. Tell me win or loss. Just nothing's changed. Just win or loss. UNC.
Let me see. Is it at or?
I'm sorry. Yeah, let me hear. I'll away.
Okay. I got it now. I got you. At UNC, loss.
At Pitt.
I want to say win, but that's a toss up. Probably a loss.
Okay, home against Georgia Tech.
Win.
Jeez.
Home against Duke.
Win.
Ooh, home against Wake Forest.
That is not the next game.
I'm sorry, Clemson. That orange on gray is really hard to see. Away at Clemson.
Loss.
Home at Wake Forest. West Forest. I'm
West
a mess
Forest.
right now.
We're going to beat West Forest at home.
Home against Boston College.
Jeez.
I'm going to say win. New coach.
At Louisville.
Oh, loss.
Home against North Carolina
I
State.
think North Carolina State's a bit of a mess right now, so win.
At Notre Dame.
Loss.
I think you predicted more wins in this COVID season than you did when we did the ACC previews.
That's true.
I think I got 5 wins.
Ooh, I don't know if you had 5 last time. I think you might have been at like 4.
Well, maybe.
Someone check the tape, please.
I just think that they're going to beat Georgia Tech and Wake Forest. Duke's kind of a toss-up.
Yeah, with Chase Bryce.
Martin's favorite.
Chase Bryce, who already carved the heart out of Syracuse.
Heisman candidate.
I'm just saying that those road games, I don't see one win in them. Those road games are insanely tough. The home schedule, I'm perfectly fine with. I think those are winnable games, but the road schedule is it's murderer's row in the ACC. It seems like, except for Florida State. But
my last thought on the ACC schedule is Florida State, actually, that they get a chance to open home against Georgia Tech, and I don't know if that Samford game's still on, but I'm going to assume it is. Starting those two out, Georgia Tech's not going to be as easy as they were last year, but I still think Florida State's probably going to win that before they play the big game against Miami.
I don't know, guys. I don't know if you read the practice report from Norvell from the other night, but they asked him how practice went, and he said something along the lines of, it went okay. We were able to run some plays.
It's exciting.
Which is an improvement for Florida State, but the fact that they were able to run some plays.
Yeah. I'm not sure they ran that many plays on offense last year. Towards the end of the season, it was a mess.
He also called out the best player is their new Australian punter, so it might be a rough season. Maybe a little bit, but I think they're still going to be pretty bad.
I mean, Australian punters are also
they're always good.
We've seen what they can do.
I mean, if you're going to find a punter, you go to Australia.
Yeah.
So the Big 12 schedule, also modified, less games, smaller conference. But you telling me that Texas Tech gets a shot at Texas first week?
Yes.
I'm on board with that.
I'm here for it. Oklahoma and Texas Tech.
Texas is back.
I'm sorry. Oklahoma and Texas also going to go ahead and still play in the Cotton Bowl. And and I think they're still going to try to maybe have 10,000 fans. It feels like a bad move. I've been
Dallas
there.
is doing weird things again.
Yeah, I've been there for the Cotton Bowl experience with the Red River Shootout, and it is party central. So if they in fact do that and they play at the Cotton Bowl, if all those bars aren't shut down, it is going to become a humongous hotspot because that's all it is. It is just bar after bar after bar after bar. Again, nuts to butts. Everybody's standing around and getting hammered. Not many safety precautions taken.
Sounds about right.
Jeff, how many wins is Kansas going to have?
No.
They're not going to beat Baylor. Who do they have week 1?
Kansas plays Baylor first week.
I don't know, man. I don't see any wins on the schedule. I mean, maybe at the end of the year they can upset TCU or Texas Tech. Maybe I just don't. It's going to be another rough year.
That's a correct answer. The 0 should be the answer, I believe, because short of a team just falling apart, I can't really imagine. Maybe Iowa State gets really bitten by the bug. But even when that's at Iowa State. Oklahoma is happening November 21st, so that's still going to be a late game. It's kind of a shame if things don't go that far that we're going to miss out on Bedlam. Baylor
also miss out on Oklahoma Baylor at the end of the year too.
Yeah, which would be
hell.
When is the last time Oklahoma State has beaten Oklahoma? It's been a few years, hasn't it?
as Stained would say, it has been a while. Let me...
Your references are sick, bro.
I'm just glad you approached this podcast with arms wide open.
Okay.
That's, listen,
I'm going to hit you with my mud shovel.
I don't want to steal anyone's sunshine. But the last time that Oklahoma State has won would have been 2014.
Okay, so...
And they won 44-10. Was that Bob Stoops? I'm sorry, hold on. No, I'm sorry. That was 2011. They won 38-35.
That sounds right.
And then it's 2011. Was 2011 the year Oklahoma State almost went to the championship?
That was Justin Blackman, I'm pretty sure, was there.
Who is that? Is he still alive?
He lasted in the league about 2 years with Jacksonville before he decided that drugs were more fun.
He took the Matt Jones route.
He went and hung out with Matt Jones.
One of the things I do think that's interesting about the Big 12 schedule in general, and speaking again to that Max Olson piece from The Athletic, West Virginia really feels like they're out on an island with this schedule. And I could really see if they have difficulties, even the Big 12 saying, all right, like you're done with us this year. We're not gonna have Texas Tech, Texas, and Iowa State travel out there. Or have you bring it into Kansas State, Fort Worth, Norman. I could see of a team dropping off, West Virginia being the first, just because that state's not in a great way, I don't think, either, with the coronavirus. And that's really the only thoughts I have on the Big 12 schedule if y'all want to hop to SEC.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Opening week kind of sucks.
Yep.
But week 2 has Auburn, Georgia, Alabama, A&M, Florida, South Carolina, if you believe that's a good one.
Yeah.
Ole Miss, Kentucky. It's probably going to be a good one. You have Vanderbilt, LSU. Let's skip that one. Georgia, Auburn, A&M, and Alabama.
That classic SEC matchup of Tennessee, Missouri.
God, it feels weird, doesn't it?
Missouri will never feel right.
I'm looking at this. So looking at the teams that we predicted to win the conference were either Alabama, Florida,
in my Vols,
and Tennessee. Okay, so let's go Tennessee first. I'll go in order. I'm going to say, all right, home and away here. Okay, at South Carolina, home against Missouri. At Georgia, home against Kentucky. Home against Alabama. Open. At Arkansas, home against the Aggies. At Auburn. At Vandy, home against Florida. Against Florida, 12-5. That is doable. That's a pretty easy, not an easy schedule. That's a doable schedule.
That is a fair schedule. Like I think it also starts out well. You know, to get your feet underneath you, you've got South Carolina, who I know people seem to like South Carolina. They're still South Carolina.
Yeah, I'm not there for them yet.
I can totally see that being a win. I think that Missouri's a win.
And that's a Missouri with a new coach whose first week they're going to get probably battered by Alabama.
Yeah, they're going to be a bunch of sad boys. And then Georgia, Georgia is Georgia, but it's early. New quarterback. We'll see. You'll see what happens with that. I think they beat Kentucky. Kentucky's losing a lot with no Lynn Bowden. Alabama, they're going to lose. I think they beat Arkansas. We collectively hate Texas A&M, so
yeah, apparently
they're going to lose.
Yeah, for those not familiar, once we got done with our conference previews, I posted a big thread on the college football subreddit, and I have what has since been confirmed as an irrational A&M fan from a part of Texas I didn't know existed. He was upset with our A&M coverage. So actually, let's just do that right now. If he's listening. After I just said that he was, I hope not. So A&M, they open home against Vanderbilt.
That's wonderfully favorable for him.
What a great week.
Yeah.
At Alabama.
Nope.
Home against Florida.
That's a tough one.
if there's no fans in the stands, I think Florida wins. If there's fans in the stands and they're letting them do that weird like clap thing that they do with the, I think Florida wins. At Mississippi State, it's probably a win.
Yeah.
Hosting Arkansas, a win. So I count them at 3-2 right now. Mm-hmm. Away at South Carolina, probably a win. Might be a tough one.
I'd probably say a win.
So let's go 4-2. At Tennessee, eesh.
My predictions,
let's
A&M going to lose that game.
I'm going to go ahead and say, to just give A&M fair and balanced coverage, I think A&M probably wins that game. Truly, I do. So that puts them as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-2. Home against Ole Miss, they're probably 6-2 at that point. Maybe lame.
They lose their last 2 games.
Yeah, that's exactly. They're 6-4. That's what I was trying to get to. They're 6-4, which is just a heartbeat away from 8-4, which they would have had with maybe 2 out of conference games, which sounds familiar, I think, and I think that's fair enough to ask or to say.
Yeah, I don't see that. I think maybe their best chance to win is probably out of those 4 big games that we think they're going to lose. Probably LSU, just because they're losing a lot.
Yeah.
We don't know what the new quarterback situation is going to look like. Don't know what the offensive line is going to look like. But it's further on in the season, so they might have their sea legs at that point. So
let's hop over to Florida. At Ole Miss, home against South Carolina. At A&M, home against LSU. Home against Missouri. At Georgia. It's actually going to be in Jacksonville. Home against
Minshew is going to preside.
Home against Arkansas. At Vanderbilt. There's going to be NXT people running in. I just lost my place. Home against Kentucky. At Tennessee. You know what's interesting to me is I could see Florida going undefeated here, and I could see both Kentucky and Tennessee either or. One of them biting them in the ass and ruining a perfect season.
Yeah.
I
really think that Tennessee might have a good season this year. It's terrifying to say that.
That front, they might. It's good. It might look a lot like last year. Like they have Georgia, Kentucky, and Alabama in a row. Like that's going to be rough. But if they can, come out of that first part 3-2, that second half.
Yeah,
that's a really manageable second half. Auburn will be tough, and I think A&M will be better, but it's going to come down to that Florida game, right?
Yeah, I think if you're Tennessee, you're looking at a floor of 6-4, ideally.
Yeah.
And you would still like to beat Alabama, Georgia, Auburn, Florida. And if you count A&M as a threat, I think
that you get at least 2 of those games.
Yeah, you have Georgia away, Florida and Alabama at home will help, I think.
I don't know how much it's going to help. I don't think there's going to be anybody in the stands, honestly.
No, but I still think that
the familiarity of your own.
Yeah,
home.
the testing leading up to a road game and then having to be so strict on the road, I imagine those are things I can only think that are going to be uncomfortable. Maybe for some teams, maybe not for Tennessee or Alabama, but if you're
definitely not for Liberty because they don't test. So
but if you're Louisiana Tech, and you don't have the type of, mega buses that Alabama have to transport, you have the amount, you don't have the luxury that the Alabama players may have afforded to them. Those road games could be tough. So, yeah, I guess depending on the team and Missouri, if they're not flying and they are going to be on a bus trip, Florida at South Carolina, Missouri at South Carolina is not a short trip. Missouri at Florida is not a short trip.
No, that's not a fun.
It's a tough one.
Fun time for everybody.
Yeah, it's going to be miserable if they're on a bus. I still think going over Alabama's schedule here before we wrap it up. Alabama at Mizzou, home against A&M, at Ole Miss, home against Georgia, at Tennessee, home against Mississippi State, at LSU, home against Kentucky, home against Auburn, and at Arkansas. I'm high on Kentucky because I think Joey Gatewood's going to be a pretty decent. I like their coaching too, but I think that Kentucky is where Tennessee needs to be right now as a program. LSU, Kentucky, and Auburn back-to-back is going to be a tough one. Going A&M, Georgia, and Tennessee, 3 of those in the 4-week period is also going to be difficult. I'm looking at Arkansas' schedule now, and I don't see a win, man. Maybe at Mizzou.
Yeah, Arkansas's in for a rough one.
Any other SEC thoughts or maybe changes that you want to make on who you think is the favorite to win the conference?
I'm going to stick with my guns. It's going to be Tennessee.
I wanted to get your guys' thoughts. I was kind of discounting LSU, but what are your thoughts on that first part of their schedule? It's pretty manageable.
Yeah, if you're having as much turnover as you did player-wise and coach-wise, yes, having Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and Mizzou feels like a pretty easy way to break in and get those reps needed.
Now, if this is Mississippi State 3 years from now, I would not want to open with that team.
I mean, all they're going to know now is they're just going to pass a lot. So I think they're still, it's not going to be that.
And it's not Leach's guys. It's not.
No, even with the transfer at quarterback, it still feels like Mississippi State is going to be still trying to fit square pegs into round holes, you know?
Yeah.
Going with, Florida, South Carolina, Auburn, Alabama. That bye week before Alabama is going to be critical for LSU too. Kentucky's schedule looks pretty easy, dude. Just Auburn, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Tennessee, Georgia, Mizzou, Vandy, Alabama, Florida. Well, that Alabama-Florida is a tough one at the end, now that I get a little further down. Okay, that's all I got for the SEC. I still have Bama, I think.
Yep.
I'm just not...
Saban wants another title.
I'm not changing. Going with Tennessee.
I'm proud of you.
Biting down hard.
Very briefly, just some notable players that have opted out of this season before we sign off that I'm upset. Caleb Farley, the cornerback out of Virginia Tech. Rashad Bateman, the receiver from Minnesota. Micah Parsons, Penn State linebacker. These were also notable players opting out before the Big Ten canceled. So, of course, Micah Parsons is out because of the Big Ten, but just to point that out. Rondale Moore out of Purdue. Greg Rousseau that Kyle mentioned, Miami defensive end. That one's going to hurt. And just recently, Kennedy Brooks from Oklahoma, which is a kind of a raw deal for Trey Sermon at Ohio State because he transferred to Ohio State to get playing time, and then, oops.
And then Ohio State says, nah. Well, Big Ten says, nah.
What season?
And Kennedy Brooks said, I don't know what a season is either.
If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing. Throw us a 5-star review on iTunes. It sincerely helps us. And I imagine we're probably not going to record for a couple more weeks, kind of let the landscape get there, see if anything else changes. But soft scheduled the week before we're intending the ACC to kick off is probably going to be when we're going to be back, and we'll make some picks. How does that sound?
Oof. Sounds exciting.
It'll be really easy to pick them this year. We could probably just do every game, honestly. It wouldn't even take that long.
I don't know. There was just one other schedule thing we didn't get to address. Our local Division I school, University of North Carolina, Charlotte, will be playing at App State Week 1.
Oh, yes. That came down. Was it today or yesterday that they announced it?
Recently. And I think UNC Charlotte is playing Duke, App State, and I don't know if it's NC State or Wake, but they're loading up on the local schedule. So
that should be the goal for them as a program. I mean, genuinely just play App State and try to play at least one of the major ACC schools that are here and do it every single year, even if you're going to get your losses early on, to build
really
a program.
Smart.
Yeah, they're going at App State and then at North Carolina. That is 2 tough back-to-backs. That is a rough go.
You can get local kids that want to go and watch the game, as a local. They're playing a big-time local school, and maybe you can flip and be like, hey, maybe you should come here and get some playing time.
Yep, we're going to have to cancel our show trip to a Charlotte game because we did intend on that being this season, I believe, and things change.
Yep. Yeah. We'll see what happens.
I do also want to give just one shout-out to someone who's definitely not listening, but that if there's a way to donate to them, please do. The runner of FBschedules.com, that website has every college football schedule for every team. And for this guy to have done the work he's done in the last month on modifying these schedules, because already it shows App State and Charlotte, it must be a full-time job lately. Absolutely insane to have to do all this.
Show him some love.
Show him some love.
Send him some beer money.
FBschedules.com. The only place to get schedules. Send him some beer money. All right, guys. Goodbye from Marty.
I guess goodbye from Kyle.
Goodbye, Micah Parsons.
See you in the league.
Yeah.
Bye, Rondell.
I'll not miss you. Or you
Bye,
either.
Rondale. You either.
Bye, Josh Jackson. Bye, Liberty's testing.
Jeez.
Hi, my name's Joshua Tracy.
And I am Corwin Heller.
And we are the hosts of a statistics and sports podcast called Juicing the Numbers.
We cover the NFL, college football, MLB, and the NHL with anything that we like to talk about in between.
If you like sports and the numbers behind it, come check out our show, Juicing the Numbers, on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you find podcasts. Hit us up on Twitter at JuicingPod.